The Israelites were enslaved in Egypt. They toiled day and night under the harsh rule of the Pharaoh, their lives filled with suffering and despair. They cried out for freedom, their voices rising to the heavens. God heard their cries and decided to intervene. He called upon Moses, a humble shepherd, to lead his people to freedom. Moses was to be his prophet, the chosen one to deliver God's message and bring about the liberation of the Israelites. With courage and faith, Moses returned to Egypt. He stood before Pharaoh, the mighty ruler, and delivered God's message with unwavering conviction. "Let my people go," he declared, his voice echoing through the halls of the palace. It was a demand for freedom, a call for justice. The Israelites were to be freed from their bondage. They began to prepare for their journey, filled with hope and anticipation for the promised land. However, Pharaoh refused. His heart was hardened, and he would not let the Israelites go. The tension in his court was palpable. This refusal would bring disaster upon Egypt. Pharaoh's defiance angered God, setting the stage for a series of divine interventions. God would show his power in ways that could not be ignored. The signs of divine anger began to manifest, ominous and foreboding. He would force Pharaoh's hand, compelling him to release the Israelites. The pressure on Pharaoh was immense. 10 plagues would befall Egypt, each one more devastating than the last. The land was thrown into turmoil. Each plague would be a testament to God's might and a clear sign of divine intervention. The power of God was undeniable. Each plague would increase the pressure on Pharaoh, weakening his resolve and escalating the tension within his court. The mounting pressure was inescapable. The first plague turned the Nile to blood, a sight that shocked the entire nation. Fish died and the river stank, making the water undrinkable and causing widespread panic. Yet Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, refusing to let the Israelites go. The second plague brought a swarm of frogs covering the land and invading homes. They filled the houses and streets, causing chaos. Pharaoh pleaded for relief from this torment. He promised to free the Israelites if the frogs were removed. But once the frogs were gone, he broke his promise, showing his deceitful nature. The third plague brought lice, tiny pests that caused immense discomfort. They infested every person and animal, making life unbearable for everyone. The fourth plague saw wild animals, or flies, swarming the land, adding to the terror. These brought fear and destruction, further destabilizing the already suffering nation. Each plague added to Egypt's misery, pushing the people to the brink of despair. Still, Pharaoh would not relent, his stubbornness causing more suffering. The fifth plague targeted Egypt's livestock, a vital part of their economy. A pestilence swept through the land, killing animals and crippling the economy. Animals died, leaving fields empty and the economy in ruins. Yet Pharaoh remained unmoved. The sixth plague brought painful boils, a severe affliction that tormented the people. They covered the bodies of the Egyptians, causing immense suffering and pain. Still, Pharaoh would not yield, his unyielding heart leading to further calamities. The seventh plague brought a devastating hailstorm. Crops were destroyed and buildings were shattered. The eighth plague unleashed swarms of locusts. They devoured what little remained of the harvest. The ninth plague was a terrifying darkness. It lasted for 3 days, plunging Egypt into fear. Still, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Finally, the 10th and most terrible plague arrived. God sent the angel of death. This angel passed over the homes of the Israelites. It struck down the firstborn child in every Egyptian home. A cry of anguish filled the air. Pharaoh had lost his own firstborn son. He finally relented. Pharaoh summoned Moses. "Go," he cried. "Take your people and leave this place." The Israelites had long suffered under the harsh rule of the Egyptians, and now, at last, they were given a chance to escape. They gathered their families and belongings and began their journey towards freedom. At last, the Israelites were free. They left Egypt in a joyous exodus, their hearts filled with hope and relief. They carried their meager belongings, each step taking them further from their past of bondage. They yearned for the promised land, a place where they could live in peace and prosperity. But Pharaoh's heart hardened once more. He regretted his decision to let them go. He sent his chariots in pursuit, determined to bring them back to slavery. The Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army. Their newfound freedom seemed doomed. Fear and despair gripped their hearts as they saw the approaching soldiers. Then Moses raised his staff. The sea parted, creating a dry path. The Israelites walked through the sea to safety. The Egyptian army followed, but the waters crashed down upon them. The Pharaoh and his army were destroyed. The Israelites were safe. They had witnessed the power of God. They were free at last, their journey to the promised land just beginning. The Israelites had overcome immense odds, and their faith had been rewarded. They had witnessed the power of God. They were free at last. They were free at last, ready to embrace their new life.